Good morning, everybody. My name is Vince Horan. I'm co-owner with my wife, Sandra, Horan Counseling Services in Tacoma, Washington. My desire today is to share with you something that I wrote several years ago, which is called Reflections on Living and Dying. My goal in sharing all of this is to bring some hope uh, for you to see how you can transform your life. I'll be reading some of this, so please forgive me if I continue to look down at my writing here, because I want to share with you what I think is a clear understanding of how I was able to transform my life. My goal is to bring hope for others to possibly change the way that they look at their lives. So I will begin. Clark Moustakis wrote a book called Turning Points back in the 60s. His central theme was that there are 4 or 5 turning points that change the course of one's life for better or worse. As I reflected on each of these turning points of my life, I discovered that each event was a catalyst for change in the box of beliefs that I carried through each stage of my life. Neil Donald Walsh, in his series titled Conversation with God, asserts that change must happen at the level of belief for it to be permanent. So many of my turning points changed the course of my life permanently and not in a way my brain could have ever anticipated. I would like to share a few of my turning points with all of you. I came into this life in an Irish Italian Catholic family. While I was born in Brooklyn, New York, my dad joined the army when I was 3, so we traveled overseas when I was very young. I never felt like Brooklyn was my home. The theme of my life at that time was to adapt, adapt, adapt. My mother was big on image. Her favorite saying was, "You'll never make the 400, a millionaires club in Brooklyn, New York." My takeaway was that I was never enough. Catholic school. When my parents decided to retire and bought a home in Lakewood, Washington, I was enrolled in a Catholic school. This was my first experience of community of faith. I was wonderstruck by the stories, the rituals, and traditions. But on the other hand, I was filled with shame, fear, and anxiety as my budding sexuality was met with an onslaught of judgment and condemnation. I was told I was a sinner and would spend many years of my afterlife in purgatory as penance for my shameful choices. While I continued to grow and pursue my vision for life, I felt split and always carried an underlying shame and belief in my unworthiness. I would strive to be impressive on the outside, but always lived in fear of you discovering I was a shameful sinner, what a shameful sinner I was on the inside, and then you would abandon me. Vietnam. In my early 20s, a friend of mine, and I decided to join the army. We were both following our father's legacies and would join on the buddy system so we could stay connected through each other's careers. We decided to be paratroopers and began our military training. However, things changed rapidly because I was put on a different track than my friend. In jump school, I broke my ankle. I was given 6 weeks to heal, 30 days of R&R at home, and then sent to Vietnam. My experience there was frightening. I was a 20-year-old man, 8,000 miles from home in a war zone where living and dying was my number one preoccupation. I was scared out of my mind and in complete survival mode. 2.5 months later, I stepped on a landmine. My life and career were now changed forever. The 20th year of my life was a significant turning point for me. I broke my ankle in jump school on my 20th birthday. After 1 year in Vietnam, the landmine, and many months of surgeries and rehabilitation, I got out of the Army on my 21st birthday. I call that the year of transformation. In later years, I would describe that time as a near-death experience that transformed me from being a warrior of the body to a warrior of the heart. Marriage and divorce. Upon my return from Vietnam, I immediately enrolled in college and pursued my academic, dating, and drinking career. I had lots of sex, found the woman of my dreams, was known as one of the friendliest drunks on campus, and had had enough intelligence to graduate and move on to graduate school. I managed to get a graduate degree and began my professional career as a counselor, but my marriage was a mess. We separated once in graduate school, and the struggles continued into my career. I was still drinking heavily at the time. Another turning point occurred on a weekend when my wife and I were contemplating divorce. She went home to her parents for the weekend, and I went on a bender for the weekend with my neighbor in the apartment below our own. After 2 days of drinking, I woke up that Sunday morning with a hellacious headache and started what would turn out to be a 6 hour walk. That was May 12th, 1972, the last day I ever drank alcohol. We divorced soon after. I buried my feelings through lots of sexual exploits, but found myself depressed and questioning my life. On death and dying. I was in dialogue with a friend from grad school who was also depressed and unhappy with his life, and we both decided to leave our jobs and spend some time together traveling. I quit my job, sold everything I had, and moved home. Within a few months, my friend had closed up his life, and left on a road trip that landed us in the mountains of Colorado. We settled in a ski resort called Steamboat Springs. It was a small town at the time with one movie theater and lots of bars and the resort. My friend was contemplating suicide and brought the book On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. That book was transformative for me. It was my first introduction into the grieving process. The only movie in town was Woody Allen's Love and Death, which we saw about 10 times. My friend would often drive off alone and wasn't sure if he would come back. He was that depressed. His depression helped me decide I was not that depressed and wanted to live. That decision to live was another turning point that once again set in motion a series of events that were both healing and transformational. Awakening to my spiritual consciousness. I often muse that once I made the decision to live my life, that had begun that had been guided by my higher spiritual consciousness. Now I'm aware that it was my higher consciousness in collaboration with an entourage of angels, guides, loved ones, and ascended masters who had helped me decide my purpose on the planet and the script I had chosen to live. After leaving Colorado, I returned home and looked for work. Traditional job searches were revealing nothing, so I decided to walk over to the Catholic Church of my childhood shame. I was greeted with open arms and began an odyssey that would once again change the direction of my life. I had discovered that the church had changed dramatically from when I left in my adolescence. I was hired as the youth minister. I was encouraged to attend and did achieve a Doctor of Ministries degree from another Jesuit university. I was encouraged to attend a weekend retreat for divorced, separated, and widowed to see if I could expand the ministry of the church to those who had been ostracized from the church. The Mass was in English, not Latin. The altar was turned to face the people. Confession and penance was changed to discernment and reconciliation. There was more openness and acceptance of other spiritual tradition. Compassion was growing in the body of Christ. My spiritual worldview was expanding. I met my wife Sandra and we were married in that community. We have been together for more than 45 years. I became a trainer and board member for the beginning experience and had a wonderful life in service to the divorced, separated, and widowed internationally. It was through both participation and facilitation in the beginning experience that I understood the connection between the grieving process and the death and resurrection process, so central to the church. I lived and witnessed the death to life process 1,000 times. My compassion for humanity and the process of life expanded. Addictions and recovery. Soon after our marriage, my wife's sister sent her son to us for help. He was an alcoholic addict. It wasn't before long before he was in an alcohol related accident which set in motion another turning point in my life. We did the interventions necessary to get him into treatment, but they wanted us to be a part of his family program. We resisted but decided to go to support him, so we thought. But as we sat in the lectures and family groups, a new revelation happened. They weren't teaching me about his addiction and broken family system. They were talking about mine. While I had stopped drinking all those years ago, I had never done any counseling to address the underlying issues of my family's battle with alcoholism or my own. Once again, I was being divinely guided into another element of self revelation and healing. Both Sandra and I opened ourselves to individual couples and group therapy. For me, the exposure to more information and awareness about dysfunctional family systems and the coping strategies helped to normalize and make sense of my past. Excuse me. The realization that it wasn't just me, but that thousands of others suffered similar traumas helped relieve the guilt and shame about my past. I participated in structural group environments that allowed me to release my secrets, anger, sadness, and fear that helped create a shift in my self esteem and a lessening of my depression and anxiety. Being supported by others alleviated my fears of rejection and condemnation. Learning the new strategies of life and healthy communication skills bolstered my optimism that I was capable of being the loving man I believed myself to be. Without our mutual surrender and vulnerability to our processes of recovery, our marriage would have never survived. In therapy, I learned about my post traumatic stress. I now understood and had compassion for the walled off emotion I kept buried deep inside of myself. I was afraid of how my rage would come out, so I pretended not to have any. I understood my emotional disconnect that affected my wife and family, and eventually I wrote a book about my Vietnam experience and my own personal struggles with post traumatic stress. It's called Boy Soldier. The trauma and grief of that experience took me more than 20 years to discover and heal. There was an emotional availability that was dead in my life, but with lots of healing and support, my emotional life is alive and well. Compassion. As I sit here and reflect on all that I have revealed to you, I feel hope and compassion. I realize that the shame, fear, guilt, anxiety, and depression I lived was based on my own ignorance and the false beliefs handed down to me by those who influenced my life in my early years. The box of beliefs I held on to was based on an underlying belief that I was flawed by nature and needed to adapt to the expectations of others to survive, seek approval, and find redemption for my sins. Fear of criticism, punishment, rejection, and abandonment, and eternal damnation were the motivating factors for seeking approval and acceptance. As I lived in fear and judgment of others, I would even more harshly judge myself. I call this strategy abandon before you get abandoned. The visions and dreams I had before slowly diminished into passivity and despair. I lived to survive and not to thrive in life. It was the wisdom and compassion of others that helped me see and then heal the dysfunction of the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that kept me bound to my shame. I realized that many of these turning points of my life could have easily taken to me in a more profound depression and despair. I have witnessed many family members and friends who died early in life because of untreated or mistreated addictions, diseases, or emotional trauma. I am thankful that I fought through my resistance and surrendered to the support that I was offered. Expanding human consciousness. Perspectives on living and dying are directly tied to your boxes of beliefs about life and death. As I have already detailed, my earlier beliefs were based in fear and ignorance. Both with education, love, and the support of others, my views on living and dying have changed dramatically. I believe that fear needs information, that grief needs to be witnessed by the compassionate support of others. Because of these things, I no longer fear life and have no shame or fear about death. But now let me take you into a different direction. Let's talk about thinking outside of the box of beliefs and expand our consciousness about living and dying. Do you believe that you can live to be 300 years? Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe that there can be peace on earth? Do you believe that you could become your own medical intuitive? Do you believe that there is no judgment from God? Do you believe that you are a part of God? Do you believe that God resides within you? Believe that you can change water into wine? Do you believe the earth has a consciousness that is directly entangled with human consciousness? Believe there is life elsewhere in the universe? The masters of the earth believe all of these things. There are many stories of ancient civilization that demonstrated all of these things. Many current religions believe some of these things. The great masters on the planet did not come to save us. They came to teach us how to save ourselves. Jesus said, I have given you all that my Father has given to me, so that my joy may be yours, and your joy may be complete. He went on to say that you could do things even greater than he. He was a master who lived and demonstrated the capacity for human consciousness to expand and also become masters in life. Neil Donald Walsh suggests that life, love, and God are interchangeable concepts for the fundamental of the energy of the universe. Dare to believe that we are in God and God that is in us. If you believe in any or all of these beliefs, it will change your life forever. How you it will change. If you believe any or all these beliefs, it will change forever how you view life and death. Because I have chosen these beliefs, I have found more joy in life. I see death only as a transition into the next phase of my soul's evolution. I now view all of my past experiences as lessons and opportunity to grow my consciousness. I feel grateful for those who have played significant roles in my life's evolution. I feel compassion. I feel compassion for those mired in the darkness of their own fear and ignorance. I am more patient each day and take time to appreciate and thank the earth that I walk on. I meditate and pray more. I trust my intuition to guide me. I believe I am eternally loved. I laugh more, I play more, and I am privileged to see my life's work not as a job but as a lifestyle. I take nothing for granted. I look forward to what life brings as the next opportunity to expand my consciousness. I know that I have the freedom to choose what enhances or diminishes my well being. I am honored to be a light worker in service to life. I hope these reflections on living and dying have brought some hope or perspective or even caused you to want to reflect on how to think outside of the box of your old belief, how to transform the traumas and pains of your life. We need education. We need to grieve and understand that in the grieving process, we move from death to life. We move from fear to hope. Remember, the end of the grieving process is acceptance, forgiveness of self, and letting go. I hope these words have any meaning or value for you. It's my privilege to support you and to offer these words to you. Thank you very much for your viewing.